I got to meet artist and PAFA grad Joan Becker at Gross McLeaf Gallery.
My name is Joan Becker. Welcome to my show. Thanks, John, for inviting me to speak with you today.
Joan, it's a real pleasure to get to ask you about your art and life. So, what kind of artist are you, and what subjects do you like to paint?
I am primarily a watercolorist, though I sometimes work in gouache, which is an opaque watercolor. I am particularly drawn to two subjects, figures and botanicals, most from my perennial garden.
Let's start with your paintings of people.
At Gross McLeaf, I'm currently exhibiting a group of 10 figure compositions.
Who are these people?
2 of them I've hired as models. Others are friends and acquaintances, and one woman who I didn't know contacted me because she likes my work.
How would you characterize these paintings?
Often tongue-in-cheek and slyly humorous. In the studio, the model and I chat, explore each other's character, and laugh a lot. The sessions are light, interesting, and often eye-opening. The settings are based on what models have told me about their lives, how they present themselves while sitting, and their interests. For example, when Tom, a career acquaintance, began posing, he told me that his great-uncle, a friend of Buffalo Bill, posed for Remington's The Cowboy on Kelly Drive. Tom brought letters that passed between Buffalo Bill and his uncle and photos of the 2 of them together. This information helped me create the pose and background. I set him up with his dad's hat and his bike to mimic a 21st century pose of his grand uncle on horseback. I'd seen pictures of Tom riding bare-chested with beads on his bike and thought it echoed the cowboy's jacket and kerchief. This is the type of narrative I try to find in all my portraits. The woman I didn't know who contacted me about modeling told me that she was a weightlifter who worked out in a sewer that had been converted into a gym. The idea for the painting crystallized in my mind.
Is there any particular artist that inspired these?
I'm a huge Alice Neal fan. I was surprised that she chatted with her models as I do.
And what's the value of that?
It relaxes the model. At least that's what I found, and probably she did too. There are few distractions when someone poses for a painting. It's not like having coffee at a restaurant. Consequently, communications is often clear, informative, and very sincere. I ask questions, and the paintings are exemplifications of little tasks and worldly visions through the sitter's eyes. It is lovely.
Years after you graduated from Moore College of Art, you went to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Why?
The Academy trains students to draw and eventually paint the human body. This was the magnet for me. It was important to understand the body and how it works, and how to turn this 3-dimensional, very complex structure into a plausible 2-dimensional figure on paper. By no means does this mean the final iteration of the body results in a static or academic drawing. Here are 2 very different figure paintings that attracted me as a child. I like many other paintings, but these 2 specifically were of great interest to me. Here are some large-scale figure paintings I have created in gouache.
What started you painting your botanicals?
While working to improve my figure drawing, I went to the exhibit of Van Gogh's drawings at the Met. The show consisted of 100 or so drawings of gardens, fields, and plants. It is an unbelievable body of work done with makeshift pens Van Gogh fashioned daily out of nearby reeds and homemade ink. Another artist, Jackson Pollock, also influenced my botanicals with his overall compositions. Extraordinary needlework by Johanna Reed was an inspiration to me.
I find these paintings to be beautiful and quite moving, and the plants are so specific. Tell me about how you make these paintings.
My botanicals are observed, and detailed from life. Many wonder if I have studied botanical drawing. I have not. My process begins by collecting roadside and bedded plants from my garden. There are no compositional or individual plant sketches. The composition is imagined as I move across the paper. A live plant is examined, drawn, and painted, and then another drawing of a plant is added. They are quickly incorporated. Most plants, when cut, only live a few days. The painting is done from left to right. I draw and paint a plant or a couple of plant parts and then continue across the paper as nature's seasonal progress continues. I am right-handed, and working left to right protects the painted areas. And I keep tracing paper under my painting hand so that watercolor paper doesn't pick up oil and dirt. I rarely overlay the watercolor washes. There's some overlaps, and there are quite a few bleeds and washes that stand alone. Since the composition is not sketched, after arriving at the right side of the paper, I go back in and complete areas that are compositionally incomplete or tuck behind a plant, another plant. This is when I check the composition as a whole and make sure it works. I have a strong desire to respect the integrity of the plants when I draw. The overall composition is very important to me. It is all about relationships of color, shape, space, and how plants grow together in the real world.
Joan, I'm always interested in how the life and art of a painter intersect. As I show my viewers your art, can you give me your life story?
I grew up in a rural town outside of Albany, New York. The Ramapo Mountains and the Adirondacks were my summer playgrounds. I remember hiding in knee-deep weeds, sitting by a stone wall and watching water trickle down on miniature plants, collecting British soldiers, which are tiny grayish lichens with red tops, and picking my most favorite plant at the time, the bachelor buttons that grew in my neighbor's yard. The area was mysterious, dark woods and large granite boulders. I come from a creative family. My mother was a terrific photographer, and my dad was a very good painter, primarily a watercolorist. My grandmother was a concert pianist, and various great-grandfathers wrote and photographed for the Herald Tribune and the Brooklyn Eagle, two wonderful but sadly defunct newspapers. Art was very accessible to me through books, museum visits, and exhibits. As a family, we debated painting theory and often discussed specific painters. My father introduced me to drawing tools and observational figure drawing. I was allowed to work in his painting studio. Cities, the opposite side of a rather idealistic childhood in the woods, attracted me. That is how I ended up in Philadelphia at Moore College of Art. After graduation, the Fairmount Park Commission hired me for field management. I managed the environmental centers, some of the historic houses, and special facilities such as the Fairmount Waterworks, the Japanese House and Garden, and Bartram's Gardens. My last job before beginning my art career was with Weston Technologies as head of their communications division. Weston is the oldest environmental firm in the country. They do building, management, and cleanup for industries that require environmental safeguards. While working, I decided to take some evening classes at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Eventually, I left my job and finished up 2 years at the Academy in 2003. I rented and eventually bought a studio, which continues to serve me today. It's a wonderful little well-lit place where I happily get to paint most days.
Did you connect with the gallery right away?
Ben Mangle picked me up after graduation, and I think I did 4 or 5 shows at his gallery on Rittenhouse Street. Ben retired, and since then, I've been with Gross McLeaf 12 years. Pursue, my current exhibit, is my 5th show there.
Back to your two favorite subjects, how would you compare and contrast them?
I do alternate between portraits and botanicals. In both, I am studying character. Alas, plants don't engage in conversation, hence the relationship is silent and focused. I spend time with people. That is a real joy. There is a special relationship between the model and the painter. Life stories and ideas are shared, which is a great privilege.
And yet, despite the fact that they give you the silent treatment, you still like to paint plants.
I have a penchant for drawing plants because of color range, density difference, shapes, and their peculiarities change from year to year. Pieces of knockout color placed next to each other within a web of plants provide daily excitement and interest to keep me painting.
Looking at your botanicals induces a feeling in me of transcendence. My eye moves around constantly, but in a calm and meditative way. Is there anything in your everyday life that makes you feel like that?
I have been swimming in pools and lakes since I was about 5. I am a long-distance swimmer, which requires similar attention to detail, focus, and discipline. It is also, of course, meditative. Ultimately, both are indulgence in an ethereal space.
So in painting, you enter that flow state?
I hyper-focus when I paint. The rest of the world disappears and for hours leaves me with only plants and painting. Discipline is not a driver anymore. It's in the back seat.
Joan, thank you so much for talking to me. This was great, and best of luck with your show.
Thank you, John. It's been very enjoyable doing this.